Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen. Welcome to Decoding Reality, a podcast about reality television, right here on the Decoding TV network. You can find more episodes of Decoding Reality at decodingreality.tv. And of course, check out the Decoding TV flagship podcast over at podcast.decodingtv.com. Many people may
Are
not
are
know.
you saying this is not the flagship podcast? You didn't launch Decoding TV to talk about Love is Blind?
Many people may not know that I cover other television shows as well, in addition to Love is Blind. Anyway, joining me as usual, Joy O'Napping. Thanks for chatting with me today about Love is Blind. How's it going?
It's great. The wedding episodes of this Love is Blind show always make me think about our wedding. And this is maybe the first time I felt a little jealous of the show's weddings.
Wow. Okay.
Just the
Um,
decor, there were some really great floral arrangements I saw.
all right. Well, on today's episode of Decoding Reality, what we're going to be doing is discussing and spoiling and to some degree recapping season 4, episode 12 of Love is Blind, which is streaming right now on Netflix. And do email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. There are a few people that emailed us like right after the episode aired. Could not wait for the episode to finish airing before they shared our thoughts. They shared their thoughts with us about the finale. So lots to discuss today, Joy. So we're going to be discussing the finale. Now, we had originally said last week, hey, might not discuss the finale. Might just be a big wrap-up episode with the finale and the reunion episode all lumped in together. And Joy basically said, the line must be drawn here. Absolutely not. We're going to have a separate recap of the actual finale episode in addition to the reunion episode.
Well, I
So
heard from one of the tens of dozens of listeners that, basically it's my friend Anju, and she's like, if you don't have time, or if Dave doesn't have time, I have a Yeti and I can step in. Like
wow.
the people
And so
need
you were
this.
like, that must be prevented at all costs, basically.
Okay, to be a little more serious, the challenge was that yesterday was my birthday, which was very lovely, but it was I was potentially going to be on the road. So things came together very last minute. That is not any kind of critique of David as a husband, but just the situation was very
hmm
fluid. And so I wasn't 100% sure what we could commit to. But here we are, the morning
Yes.
after.
Yes. The morning after the finale has aired, and we are here talking about it. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. I mean, usually we like to begin by discussing anything that was brought up last episode or anything that's happened since last episode that might be worth mentioning, right?
Or a spate of corrections that we might have.
Yeah,
I
or
think we may
corrections.
not have any major corrections.
No major corrections. Anything else that came up, Joy, that you wanted to mention before we get into kind of overall thoughts on this episode?
Well, I do want to share contextually because it was my birthday that we watched this immediately after eating birthday cake with our friend Carter, and my parents, who ordinarily would not have been there and also have never seen a single episode of this show. So watching them react to it was pretty funny.
Yeah, so we watched the Love is Blind season finale with Joy's parents who had never seen an episode of Love is Blind before, and she may refer to their reactions during the course of this podcast episode.
Yes, and they've never seen any reality dating show, so they really have
They have no
no
frame of
frame of
reference at all.
reference for any of this. Yes.
I think you also wanted to bring up some news about Marshall that's come up since the last episode, right?
Well, this is a small thing, but Marshall, as you mentioned previously on Decoding Reality, many of the participants in Love is Blind seem to have been given way freer reign to talk to the press and
Yeah.
post and whatever. And I think that's partly, Netflix wanting
My
to actually get attention for the show.
my sense is that they have like perfected the template for how they do PR for the show at this point because nothing was spoiled in advance by the cast members. But they still did a ton of press during the season. So I just think it was very smart. Like before, I think it was like lockdown, don't say anything to anyone. We don't want anything to be spoiled. This season, it was more like the cast members can talk and everything's going to be okay. And
They
so
even had a
yeah.
pods bus, I think, in like New York City where you could meet
Oh well,
Deepti
there's
and
activation. There's activations.
yeah,
There's like pods around the country where you could like it was.
meet
Uh,
Bartiz and Kwame. That won't go sideways.
yeah, but eventually they're going to start developing ways for people to want to watch the show. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, go ahead, Miss Joy. What were you going to say?
Well, so in one of these interviews that Marshall has given, and so I appreciate that it feels like in the past seasons the cast members have been really disempowered and held down,
Yeah,
like raring at the bit to give their chomping at the bit to give their side of the story and been unable to do so, and that's a terrible feeling for them.
yeah.
On the other hand, this kind of free flow of information means that the show, or what we think of as the stories of the show, extends so far beyond the boundaries of watching the show that it's quite hard to keep up with. So probably people didn't pick up on this necessarily, but Marshall gave an interview in which he was asked, "Did you talk to anybody else from the pods after you and Jackie broke up?" And he said, "Yes, I talked to Keisha." Now, the producers aren't going to highlight this because they never showed Keisha in the first place. But it basically sounded like a pretty sad story. He said he was very gentlemanly and vague about it, but he said, "I feel a lot of regret because I think I led Keisha to believe there was like a chance there that wasn't really there." And so who knows what other kind of tentacles of real experiences people are having that we aren't even necessarily exposed to.
Indeed. There's a few other things that have actually also occurred. I don't know if we want to talk about the Jackie apology or not Jackie apology, Jackie
Oh,
Instagram
I was
post.
like, Jackie's never gonna apologize.
Yeah, yeah.
She won't apologize till she's 90.
Let's put that up on the screen here. Putting up on the screen. And I'll read from it. So Jackie from the show posted the following quote: "I have seen the latest episodes that have premiered on Love Is Blind, and I must speak the truth.
David,
Marshall
we
and I,
talked about this last time. Can we
did I don't remember reading this
we
whole thing though.
we
Did
didn't
I?
read it, but
Yeah.
we covered all the content in this.
Okay. Okay. Well, never mind then.
I'm very up on the latest with Jackie. I'm watching Jackie like a
Okay.
hawk.
All right.
I think the main update I can offer is that I had my teeth cleaned and she was not my dental hygienist. So
yes, that was
bullet dodged.
a big step. Okay. And then also Chris Yimon in the YouTube chat at youtube.com/decodingtv says Wendy Aerospace Engineer did get engaged on the show. There's a People Magazine
Yes!
article.
The
Now,
kickboxing aerospace engineer.
so according to People Magazine, which I am reading right now about Wendy Aerospace Engineer, Jimmy and Wendy got engaged after being each other's top picks from the start. They bonded over their joint interests, including shared careers in engineering, and their relationship continued to grow over time. Once they returned to Seattle, Jimmy and Wendy dated for 3 months, but she ended up breaking up with him after realizing they had different perspectives on dating. They have since remained on good terms. End quote. So,
That sounds
real,
like a very Seattle couple we missed out on.
real
Two
emotional roller
engineers.
coaster. Real emotional roller coaster there.
I do think that we may not know every couple that's ever gotten engaged on the show that didn't kind of make the final edit of getting the
Yeah.
weddings produced. But I think that none of them have gotten married, if I'm right.
I'm not. I do not endorse that statement that Joy just made because I have no proof. So we're gonna probably have another fact check. Joy is just throwing around random assertions in this podcast. All right. So episode 12. Let's talk about it. We saw all the results of all the weddings, and I think this is this I am pretty sure of. This is the highest success rate in terms of
Yes.
number of weddings that actually went through. There were 3 weddings where both parties said yes out of 4 possibles. And that is like the highest percentage of any show, or not percentage. I think actual absolute numbers as well of any season. In
Right.
the
So
past.
I didn't see season 1, but I think 2 couples got married
I think
from
that's right.
it.
Yeah.
Is that right? And one of them got divorced and one is still together. Is that
Let's not put out stats that I don't think that's right. So let's not put out stats that we don't know. Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Well, clearly the pressure of my prior corrections is really weighing on this casual banter podcast.
Yep.
And then in the second season, I know for a fact. Oh,
Yeah.
what?
No. I was just saying. I think I've already said all that needs to be said about that. Suffice to say, the most number of weddings happened and that's great for Seattle because it shows that Seattle is just full of loving people. That's all I wanted to.
Well,
That's the only.
okay, can I say
Yeah.
typically,
Good.
like, 2 couples get married, it feels like, it's in the 1
Yes.
to 2 kind of
Yes.
range. So to
Precisely.
get to 3 feels like a really big deal, and then to have lost Marshall and Jackie, so there were only 4 "chances," quote, unquote, to have 3 out of those 4 feels quite surprising.
Hmm. So we got to see 4 weddings, of which 3 were successful. They were all seemingly in the same location, and
Mhm.
that location, that area, is stunningly beautiful, right? And do you know what the location is, Joy? I
I
think it's.
believe it's called North Fork Farms in Snoqualmie, so it's kind of near where Twin Peaks was filmed,
Yeah.
the original show. It's, like, right at the edge to almost be called suburbia now for Seattle, but it's because Seattle is, like, nestled in the mountains, it really has that kind of rugged mountain feeling. It is I thought it was stunning. I would have been, thrilled to be gifted that location for my
Right,
wedding.
right. Like, especially coming from like season 1 of the show, where the wedding looked pretty sad. I have to say,
Like,
like,
it was in a conference center
yeah,
room,
and it's
you
just like
know?
and they're fitting everyone in there. It looked like it was like in a hotel like lobby, basically, and which is not. There's nothing wrong with getting married in a hotel, but it just you could feel that they're just trying to cram as many weddings into the most efficient space possible in season 1. Going from that to this, which is like this would be the envy of most people's weddings, right? This wedding in North Fork Farms in Snoqualmie.
Setting
Um,
aside the rain and the fact that everyone had to wear, like, Patagonias to stay
there was one
warm.
guy wearing a full-on like blanket in the audience, which is really funny. So, yeah,
I was into that guy.
but the location was pretty awesome, and I think the whole season has showed that Seattle is a really beautiful place to live. So, and potentially get married. So,
So, can we talk about the high rate of people getting married on this show? I wonder, of course, there's a lot of randomness in these small numbers. So I don't want to overread into it, but I did want to reflect that I found the Seattle dating scene when I moved here from Chicago, another place that, season 2 was filmed. I found it a little weird as a place to just date, but I did find that people were more ready to settle down. There were more single people at different ages. So in Chicago, I really felt like you kind of lived on, this is just my own experience, but like on a conveyor belt where you live in this neighborhood if you're right out of college and you're rooming with a couple friends, then you move to this neighborhood when you're a young professional, then you move to this neighborhood when you get married, and then you move to this neighborhood when you like have a stroller but haven't put your kids into school yet, and then you move to whatever neighborhood or the suburbs when you are ready to put your kids in school. And it felt like you were on this kind of path through the city, at least among my friend group. And there's a lot of privilege in what I just said. I want to acknowledge that. But I think that it sort of made me feel sometimes like if I hadn't advanced to the next stage and made the move to the next neighborhood, that I was like behind other people. And I had absolutely no feeling of that when I moved to Seattle. I was in my 30s and it felt like a great place to be, sort of single in your 30s, single in your 40s, single in your 50s. Um, I have that's just a thing I've noticed.
yeah, that's interesting because that is the experience of almost no one else. Seattle is regarded, or sorry, frequently regarded as one of the worst cities ever to date. There is an article in the Seattle Times I'm reading from 2019. Seattle singles may not be surprised to hear that for the second time in a row, the city has been named America's worst city to find love by the Great Love Debate podcast, a touring series of town hall style events that's returning to the region next month. Solo Seattleites earned low marks across the board for lack of communication, confidence, and optimism, according to staffers behind the podcast, who used a formula weighing the opinions and demographic data for more than 92,000 singles over the past 5 years and millions more who listen to the podcast. Danielle Compeomore wrote, quote, I quickly learned that Seattle men are far different from any other type I've encountered. Shy, timid, and seemingly incapable of striking up a conversation, let alone offering to buy a female a drink. The Seattle male's inability to successfully merge with their female counterparts reminded me of the colossal cluster that is I-5 on-ramps. Much like a Seattleite merging onto a freeway, our men's apprehensive tendencies leave them incapable of finding either the open lane or the open bar stool, end quote. So, uh, I'm really glad that's been your experience, Joy. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I actually think my experience is not in direct conflict with the way you just said. I think I don't want someone to buy me a drink because I make enough money to buy a drink. I don't need to be taken care of. So I have like a very feminist version of like what dating looks like that is probably, according to this article, coded as the man being, I don't know, like a beta and ineffectual. And I'm like, this is how I like it. When I got to
Wow.
Seattle,
First of all, thank you, Joy, for outing me.
yeah,
Great. Really appreciate
but you
that.
don't
Thanks.
have enough dollars in your wallet to buy me a drink. It works out great.
Thanks.
Um,
Awesome.
no, like when I first got to Seattle, I was coming from other places. I've mostly lived in the South, but also Chicago. And I would get to a door and no one would open it for me. And I realized like that's the quote unquote cost of feminism here is like, I got to get my own door. And I was like, you know what? I will do this to feel less oppressed. This feels great. So, um, I would also say part of what I was trying to express is that I
Mhm.
actually think the city, if you are going to stay single and not couple up, is a comfortable place to do that. That's for me. Like it in other cities,
Mhm.
it felt like you must be in a couple. Um, and by a certain age, or like you've lost your chance. And that was very irritating to me.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so, okay, hey, it ain't for everyone, but I'm just putting out there it was for me. And a small note about the on ramps for I-5. I think what that person is speaking to, since this is probably our last chance to talk about Seattle culture, um, is the fact that when people drive here, they also have that sort of timid, shy, retiring energy when they drive on the highway. They tend to drive the speed limit. They merge early. If you have to have a force merge, it's just a very sort of polite, rules based feeling. And so, just FYI, if you ever come here, don't be the jerk that merges too
Mhm.
aggressively. Now, I know you have different feelings about that, David, but it is a very different subculture than anywhere else
I'm
I've lived.
just I'm
So,
just still I'm still reeling from the fact that I think you just called me a beta in front of everyone,
I
which is
know.
now I feel like I need to defend my honor, but that's okay. I'm so secure in my masculinity. I'm just willing to let that sit there. So, let's move on to the episode. Let's move on to the developments that have occurred, shall we? There's no other
Yes.
meta topics, right?
Not
Thank
unless you need
God.
to book time at the shooting range later to
Thank
prove how alpha you
God.
are.
Okay, so the big thing that happened at the end of last episode was Chelsea said yes, and then Kwame, we didn't know what he was going to say, and then we find out at the beginning of this episode, Kwame says yes. Now, there's been a lot made about this topic because I think really this episode, in my opinion, shows that to a large degree the edit has failed.
Oh,
Love is Blind season 4, the edit has failed because everyone was expecting Kwame to say no, and everyone was expecting and nobody understood kind of the extent of the problems between Micah and Paul. Because
that
everything
one is a bigger problem to
right,
me.
right,
Yeah.
right. But like everyone was expecting Kwame to say no, no one knew that Micah and Paul had all these problems. And so it's like very little of those things were in the edit. And so I think part of it is the failure of the edit to kind of show us these things. But that being said, I do think that there is a lot of positive stuff shown between Kwame and Chelsea. But none of us, I think, were expecting Kwame to say yes. Right, Joy?
I think I said I thought he would say yes, but I thought he should say no, which again is like partly a reflection of the edit. But even if there was all this marvelous connection that we didn't get shown, and even if things were chopped up to pieces in some of their disputes that made us feel like she was not being as flexible or understanding about the level of like sacrifice he would have to make to move to Seattle, um, or we missed out on footage that indicated the family would think it's really okay, or he could become at peace with his mom. All the major kind of building blocks of their story. Nonetheless, he did flirt with Micah twice. And I don't think there's like a friendlier version of the edit that could probably absolve that. The way that they spoke to each other in sort of coded language about, I just really care about you. I think about you all the time, like it was very uncomfortable. So I am curious if now, almost a year later in the live reunion, Chelsea will have seen that footage and, like, what her reaction is gonna be. I can all the rest of it, I can assume, is just we missed it in the edit, and there was, like, a stronger connection than we thought.
There has been a lot of dialogue online about Kwame's demeanor in the moments following the wedding, right? And about how he looked extremely uncomfortable. He looked very stiff, and that he didn't look happy. Um, and it's funny. It's funny to read the memes, but at the same time, you never really know what's going through someone's mind during a high pressure situation like that. You know what I'm saying? But let's here. I will put a couple of memes. I'll put up one very popular tweet here on the screen. But it basically is a comparison between Kwame seeing Micah at the party versus Kwame seeing Chelsea walk down the aisle. I sent this to you yesterday, Joy, and it's basically he looks way happier to see Micah than seeing Chelsea on their wedding day. Um,
I think that is so unfair.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, okay, go ahead.
obviously part of the allure with Micah and it being easy is that there's not an actual commitment there. Like, it is a lot easier to have a fun flirt than it is to, like, commit to somebody. And I don't know, I feel uncomfortable with reading too much into this because maybe people are right, who are making this, like, comparison, but during my own wedding day, which wasn't filmed for national television and
Right.
or global television and wasn't like this level of pressure cooker. Normally if people are going to call it off, they do it before they get to the I do moment, like so I felt pretty confident when I was walking down the aisle that it was actually happening. I was like physically shaking. I probably did not look incredibly happy. I'm not sure I looked like so I remember my body was flooded with so much stress cortisol from trying to get down this aisle that had stairs on it and not fall over that like I was not in a good state. And if you had taken a photo of me right afterwards, I'm not sure I would have looked so happy.
Yeah.
Like and so not to say I didn't have lots of happy moments that day, but I don't know. I
But it's a
I
stressful situation, and you
it
just can't you
is.
can't you can't judge based on how people reacting, like this snippet of interactions that you're seeing, right?
Yeah, and who
Unless
knows
you-
what he's
unless
thinking about.
unless they're Brett and Tiffany, which in which case you can judge. They look super happy and awesome, and blessings upon them. Um, but yeah, anything else about Chelsea and Kwame? I think
I'm just so curious because they might live here now. He may have gone through with the
yeah.
move. Um, if there are neighbors, I could totally see them ending up in our neighborhood, and our neighborhood's very tight knit. Um, and she really wanted to have kids right away, so they might even be pregnant. We'll see in the reunion special, I guess.
Yeah, or Kwame found out that Micah's wedding didn't happen, and maybe that complicated things. So
I
we'll
don't think
find out.
Micah is that messy. I think Micah wants to be chosen, but I don't think she would go and like. I, I
I'm not
I
saying it'd
mean,
be her
honestly.
fault. Anyway, anyway, we'll see.
Terrible,
We'll
terrible.
see. All right, so
That's
that's Kwame
terrible.
and Chelsea. The edit didn't make it seem like he would say yes. It seemed like there was too many issues for him. But if he is in fact like committed to the situation, then we'll see what happens at the reunion. But uh, I wish them the best.
Can
But
I just slightly
it's confusing
disagree?
edit though. Go ahead though. Go
I
ahead. Yep.
actually think it's exactly the right edit for reality TV, which is you want the audience to be guessing up until the last minute. And I thought it was 50-50 unclear in the edit which way it
I
would
see.
go.
I see. For me, I thought it was like very heavily leaning against. That's kind of I would say like 80-20. So and then for it to be 80-20, he was going to say no. And so for it to be a reversal of that was a little bit disorienting personally. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, SK said no after we got an edit where we thought he would say yes. So
yeah, but they still were together. Like it was very different than the other no's that have been on the
sure.
show, in my
Okay.
opinion. Okay,
Okay.
anyway, all right, Micah and Paul.
Oof. What happened here? Like, I think the viewer is left to wonder, what the hell was that? Because again, the edit makes it seem like he's fairly likely or he's on the fence. And then she also seems leaning yes, but at the last minute, she basically says, instead of answering whether I do, and you get the sense that the producers will make the person who says "I do,"
Go
like the
first.
sure yes, go
Yeah,
first, so
because
to draw out the suspense.
there's not a consistent order.
Right.
Sometimes the guy goes first, sometimes the woman goes. There's no consistent order, right? Yeah.
And then
So
she punts it to him, and from that moment onward, people start saying things off camera or, like, to the behind the scene, one-on-one, that feel like they're from a different show or a different storyline,
mhm.
like, he basically didn't feel s she never felt safe with him. Why was she thinking of marrying someone she never felt safe with, and, getting to a yes is not necessarily the safety. You can still feel unsafe after he says yes, so, like, it was a very odd. He says he never could picture her as the mother of his children, which feels like a pretty big issue. So it and yet in when he's talking to his guy friends, he's like, "Last night I had a certain decision, today I'm feeling differently." So it does feel like he really contemplated marrying someone who he wanted, even though he wants to have children, that wouldn't be the mother of his children?
The whole Paul pre-wedding thing was very fascinating to me
Hmm.
because I think when like very often people don't know what a person's relationship with someone else is like. Like your friends
Sure.
often don't know the full extent of what the relationship is like. And so we as humans in society are coded to like encourage like every thing, every aspect, every institution, every social norm in our society is configured in such a way to get people to couple up, right? And Paul is having really uh genuine struggles about it. And he's like he's saying, "Hey, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that." Every single person he talks to says, "Hey, Paul, you're overthinking it. Hey, Paul, like, don't get in the way of yourself. Like, hey, Paul, like, stop being super analytical." And so that's interesting. That's an interesting dynamic that I think is probably pretty true to life for a lot of people. Is like, oh, if somebody was like, they see two people, they have no idea what the relationship is like, but they meet, they've met them, and it's like, hey, that person's nice. Like, oh, you should hold on to that, whatever. Like, that's just a very common dynamic, I think. Unless it's like super toxic, which I don't think this was, right?
I think what you're
Um,
saying is other people not being able to see fully into a relationship, when they see that something is, like, kinda good or good enough or the person seems nice, will kinda tell you to go for it. Is that
yeah, yeah, that's right, that's right.
because they
And
can't see
then
all the problems?
and Paul is I thought Paul had a really interesting struggle where he says, "Hey, like I'm really on the fence," and to me, it's he can't deal with the fact that such an important decision can be basically decided via the equivalent of a coin flip. Like he can't you can see he cannot process that because he's like, maybe one day I feel like yes, maybe the other day I feel no, and like and he just can't process the idea that life is full of life can sometimes have these risks that you can't fully calculate. And so he felt very tormented by that, um, and that's something that I understand. Like just as somebody who has difficulty making big decisions sometimes. Like I understand that. But then, as you point out, there seemed to be a whole subplot that was missing from the edit, where neither of them really felt like they were comfortable. There's been a whole conspiracy theory that's come up online that Micah threw it to Paul because Micah was going to say no too, and she didn't want to look like the bad guy. The other theory is that Micah knew that if she said yes, it would sway Paul, and so she was trying to kind of be compassionate to him. That's kind of the most surface level reading, which I actually am fine with either reading. Like I think either could be true. But I didn't know if you had any opinion on like which one of these theories might be accurate, Joy.
I mean, no. I think just like I can't read what
Yeah,
Kwame's body language was, I don't think it's knowable. Um,
but
but
I
the
think
way she
it's
said it, it
yeah,
was a little bit of a pre-prepared sounding language,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think she had planned that. Um, it is really odd. I mean, we have not even talked about Shelby, who gets an awful lot of screen time throughout the season. showing up with her like disdainful glares and side eye throughout the whole thing, and then at some point during the wedding saying, "I'm not drunk enough for this." Um, that when like Micah throws it to Paul first, Paul says no. Micah walks out on him mid sentence, and Shelby basically says, "This is the way I hoped it would go."
Yeah.
And now I know there can be editing tricks about when things happen in time, but that was pretty tough to hear. It did make me wonder if Shelby coached her to not go first.
Yeah, and we should also point out that Shelby is the true villain of Love Is Blind. So,
More than
um,
Jackie?
okay, so
Everyone's the true villain to you.
somebody on our YouTube channel commented that hey, all the other people who like said no at the altar got to keep their rings too. So the fact that Jackie kept her ring is not like indicative of whether she's an actual villain or not. And it's like, okay, I basically I wanted to scale back my thoughts on my intensity of on Jackie a little bit. I
Okay.
I still
Okay.
think she is the worst this season for sure,
The
um,
homophobia does it for me.
but
Yeah.
slightly less than the worst than what I said earlier. That said, Shelby's reaction, I do think is genuinely reprehensible. Like, I think that to take joy in your friend's humiliation, even if it is an outcome that you wanted, you're being filmed, you know, Paul's not like the worst guy in the world. Like that Micah certainly has strong feelings about it. And then to be like gleefully laughing while your friend's storming off the stage, it's rough. It's not
It's really tough.
it's not good. Not a good not that is not a good friend. And honestly, I was surprised that Micah had even invited her to the wedding. Like, if a friend of mine was like,
She's
"I do
there for
not,"
the whole thing. She's there for the dresses, she's there for the bachelorette, she's there the whole time. I Even I, who did not think Paul and Micah should get married, when Micah basically cuts him off mid-sentence and just walks out because she can't tolerate, like, the feeling she's having, and she doesn't wanna have, like, an ugly cry in front of everybody, like, which is understandable, that's a human instinct, right? Um, I felt bad for her, and, clearly Shelby, who is much closer to her, did not feel bad or not bad enough. Side note, my mother at this moment where I personally felt the most sympathetic to Micah that I have all season, just as a fellow human. My mother says, "Good for him for Paul rejecting Micah," because she was really not about this couple. Um, and I think, um, it feels like we'll get some version of the truth maybe on Sunday during the reunion. I think
yeah,
he probably, like, what you can intuit from the scraps we were finally given is that he cared about her and maybe he was in love with her on some level, but that didn't mean he wanted to marry her, and I have absolutely felt infatuated with or in love with people who I did not think were, like, the right life partner, and I think that both those things can be true. Um, so I don't know why this would be so, impossible, like, to comprehend, for him earlier. But I think, he would say stuff like, "Is it more like about not losing the person in the short run?" And it does feel like Paul has not had a lot of experiences where he was even in touch with his feelings or got to feel more, you know, grounded or nurtured. So I hope he finds that and someone who will be a witchy woman who brews kombucha and also wants to have children.
yeah.
They can live on Vashon Island together.
Going back to the thing of Shelby, I think that's just if there was if I had a friend who just did not support the marriage at all, I would not invite them to the wedding. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it just uh, so but and you can read into the fact that Micah has friends like this at all, but it just the whole thing is not a good look for anyone. Um and
Shelby is so similar to Irina, like, you really do feel like Micah maybe kinda surrounds herself with these kinds of people,
yeah.
and maybe doesn't know what a more supportive friend might look like, or I mean, another alternative is she probably knew there was some chance it would go down, and maybe she wants the person who will, like, slash Paul's tires.
The genius of the show Love Is Blind is This is a couple, Micah and Paul, that I thought made absolutely no sense. They have virtually nothing in common. Um, they're other than the fact that they're both like fairly conventionally attractive people, like, but it's like I don't know what they would talk about. I don't know, but at the same time, you hear them saying, "Oh, I miss her all the time," and like when we're not with each other, we want to be with each other. It's like, okay, what like, um, if that's true, that's great. And so it was a couple that I'm like, I hope they say no because this is wrong for each other. They're not right for each other. That's like my feeling. Then when the no actually does happen, it's actually really sad. Micah's parents are there, and Micah's mom has like had health issues that's become very clear during the course of the show, and it's just like you don't wish this upon any family member. Like Love Is Blind forces these families into these really terrible situations and makes you feel sympathy for a character like Micah, who in episode 1 or 2 is like at the bottom of my list. Now I actually feel bad for her because of everything that happened here. The people who are less charitable to her are saying online, "Oh, she manipulated everything to be like this." It's like, okay, maybe that's true, but her friend sucks. She got turned down at the altar. Her family had to watch it happen. Like that's no one wants that for anyone. So yeah,
I feel like we'll see what happens on Sunday. But Micah also broke down into tears in another interview I saw recently, where basically the person asked like, what has it been like seeing like the social media reaction to the show, and she almost instantly started crying because I think um she's unlike Irina. I think she actually can perceive why the stuff she had done is actually hurtful.
hmm
And, obviously she apologized. We talked about this last time, but like, I think she is really going through it. And I hope she's going through it because actually a number of things she did were not great. Um, like flirting with Kwame twice in a pretty like she started it way,
well, and
especially the first time.
that awful thing that she said to Kwame about like the proposal failing and stuff.
Yeah.
That was the most cold blood. Like we talked about that, but that was the
Well,
most
and
brutal
she was
thing.
like a killer in the pods too. And if she's now reckoning with like what is it like to be like this kind of person, setting aside like that she got dumped and maybe that's like a sad experience, but I think people should have commensurate sad experiences. And like I don't know, I don't feel that bad for her. I think she's like except that for anybody to go on this show, the amplitude of what's coming at you is millions of people like deciding they
Yeah.
should comment on your appearance, your choices, your what, like the amplitude is too much. But like I also, I don't know, I suspect she's going to be in a pretty fragile place come Sunday.
Can I read to you from the Instagram page of Micah? Is that cool?
Is it the apology?
No, it's not. We already did that.
Okay, yeah, I just
Yeah,
want to make sure.
yeah. Just make sure there's no duplicative content here um, on the podcast. So she posted an image that has she has since posted an image of herself just kind of on a stool, and she says, "Quote: Listen, I've taken care of myself my entire life. I'll be okay." Heart emoji. Right. That's what she said. The top comment from a user named Feedruru says, quote, Shelby has got to go. 21,732 likes. Kringle Pringle says, quote, holy my friends would never laugh at my heartbreaks like that. Please. 9,700 likes. Hina Panchi writes, quote, when I saw Shelby laughing at your pain and, quote, hoping it'd go like that, it finally made sense why you were the way you were with the other girls during the pod episodes. You are in a toxic relationship with your so-called best friend. She brings out the worst in you, and Paul actually brought out the best because I'm sure I'm not the only one that felt better about you dating during the later episodes. She is the worst friend anyone can have. Please take proper care of yourself by dropping her out of your life or anyone remotely similar to her, and go to therapy to treat yourself with kindness. Unlike Shelby's treatment of you, end quote. 9,600 likes. I feel like Shelby's the one that's going to need some therapy after this. But
Oh, Shelby needed therapy before,
sure.
I'm curious. I'm curious if she will find it even remotely an actual criticism of her. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I don't she
Yeah.
seems like a person who might be a little bit impervious to criticism, which,
Mhm.
I mean, is a way to walk through life. Um, I do wanna say, before we move on from Paul and Micah entirely, that Kwame has talked about the Micah stuff since the show aired. So can I read you some of this?
Yeah.
Um, so in a Q&A with Vulture, the question was, after you guys got out of the pods, you're having all these long conversations with Micah. At the time, did you realize that this might make Chelsea uncomfortable? He says, "Man, the Mexico scene was tough. That was really hard to watch, having to go through that again and feel it and think, wow, how could I be so stupid?" He goes on to say it was dumb, it was immature, I let my ego get the best of me. He talks also about the birthday party. Um, he kind of deflects a little bit, but basically, is trying to own up to some extent. But one of the things he says that I think is interesting is he says, um, "My entire life, I've dated Micahs. Well, I guess Pod Micah. I'm going to be honest, Pod Micah's a little different from real life Micah." And I feel like there is a duplicity in how duplicity's way too strong, but, like, you and I talked about in the early episodes how it really felt like people were finally entering this and playing it like a game, and I would put Micah at the top of that list.
Mhm.
I feel like there was a lot of energy with the wedding included, which is like she just wants to win. She wants to win the final thing and get the best outcome on paper. And if the down the road that means a divorce, then fine, you know?
Mhm.
And I do um think that's a way to do this. um and I'm sure the pressure to say yes on some level is actually quite high. So, anyway,
All right. Anything else on Micah and Paul?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But, I think the
Some
shock was not that somebody said no, but it was the all the subtext that poured out afterward.
Right, right. And I would agree, people can have their own opinions about whether Micah set this all up or whatever, but I think um I do think it is open to interpretation. I don't think there's a definitive case to be made other way unless or until Micah actually comes out and explains what happened. So,
I do have something to say, and it's really catty.
okay, go ahead.
I think Micah looks stunning. I think her dress is incredible. The tailoring is incredible. If you find yourself in the situation where you need to wear a dress that's that daring, there are small snaps you can put into the dress so that your bra strap does not end up being that exposed. It was
Uh-huh.
very distracting to me, and I felt really bad for her because I think she actually looked amazing. She looked like a Veronica Lake era movie star, but, yeah, anyway, or they can actually sew the bra into the bodice of the dress itself so that there are no straps. So just, FYI.
Some people were commenting. I saw a comment that like that's how bad Micah's friends were, is they let her walk down the aisle with the strap out like that. So,
Well, the whole wedding looks pretty nice, and
yeah.
so it's really out of place that this $4 fix that I just described, like, hasn't been done. Like, there are ways in which the weddings can occasionally feel a little janky, and I think for me, that was one of them. Like, you would
Yeah.
never let that happen on your actual wedding day.
But I agree, the overall dress was excellent. Like Micah's overall dress
Really, really
was really good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes, and not
okay,
everybody could pull that dress off, so, anyway, I'm trying
we
to
have
be really
some late breaking.
balanced.
Yeah, indeed. We have some late breaking news here from Christopher Yimon, who writes, "Quote: Kwame and Chelsea might not be together anymore. Kwame doesn't follow Chelsea on Instagram, and Chelsea didn't add any photos of them on Instagram after the wedding. So bad sign. Bad sign when you don't follow. Yeah,
Yes, and this vulture conversation, which you can go, look up, he does say, like, in present tense, like, "I'm her biggest hype man, she's my biggest hype man, she's met my mom now." Like, I don't know, TBD. Maybe she just got real mad in the past few weeks, which I would understand.
all right. After watching the show, go out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Brett and Tiffany.
So great they're almost boring. Incredible, incredible editing decision to preview him saying, "This shouldn't happen on my wedding day. Nothing should go wrong." And it turns out it's about the tailoring of his
Yeah.
pants.
Yeah, the biggest drama that comes out of this is whether or not his pants fit, and it just reinforces why he's so cool. Because he wants to look his best, which like most men wouldn't care as much. But he's awesome, and he asks her father for her hand in marriage. Is a very sweet scene. You know, it's just they seem like lovely people. The wedding seemed great. Uh, Everything's great. Good job. And the only other thing is Marshall shows up, and that's very powerful as well, where like you can tell that the events of the previous few weeks have really hurt him. But he's still there to support his friend, and that's also really lovely to see. The whole thing was very moving, I thought. So, yeah.
They spent a fair bit of time on Brett and Tiffany, even though they're like the least interesting television, quote unquote. But I did think it was nice to show him meeting the dad for the first time and what that conversation felt like. It was nice to hear him talk again about his brother and, how sad that was for him and to hear him talk about it with other friends. I don't know. It felt like it's important to continue to mourn, right? And make space for that. I thought it was really funny when his brother, Angus, I think, who I love, um, says to him, like, Brett has raised his voice by about 5%, and he's like, "Don't get aggro with me." And Brett is like, "I'm not being aggro. I just want my tailoring, to, like, look good." And you can tell he's frustrated, but I really felt that because I also am from a family that's really polite, so that would be aggro in my family as well, but, to the cameras, it's certainly not, people throwing things at each other or whatever. I was like, "Oh, what a calm, quiet family. That sounds very exciting, to me." This is what I would be familiar with. And then I was really curious about the behind the scenes logistics that led them to that tailoring shop. The thing is, like, they are in the mountains an hour east of Seattle. There are not a ton of tailors who would be super close. And so for them to have to find somebody who would allow them to film, I feel like we got a lot of shots of that tailor shop and the name of the tailor shop because probably that was part of the deal is like, hey, can you tailor these pants immediately? We promise we'll give you a lot of coverage in this show.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty high stakes because if they didn't do a good job, Brett might have said so, and that would have been bad press for them. But fortunately, all was okay, right?
I thought Tiffany looked incredible. Her white ensemble with it was different than what she had picked out in the bridal shop, and her tiara kind of reminded me a little bit of Michelle Yeoh at the Oscars this year.
Hmm.
Um, I will say, I thought Brett looked great. He always looks great. I was hoping for a little bit more like fireworks in the shoe department because,
Mm.
of his background, but that's okay. He probably has fireworks in the shoe department 364 days a year. So, yeah. It was actually cool when he was like talking about these shoes in different colorways and her dad like knew what he was talking about and, like I feel like sneakerheads really they know. That was a really cute moment.
Brett and Tiffany almost justify the entire existence of this horrifyingly terrible show in general because hey, if the show can bring those two lovely people together, maybe it was worth all of the horrors it has inflicted upon our society. You know?
They're also 34 and 36 respectively, and if the show cared about having people actually get together successfully, I do wish the show cast slightly older people
Mm.
more often. And I think that was a choice this season to go a little older and we'll see.
Just because people older who get married tend to be their marriages tend to be more successful in general, I think, right?
Well, I think you'd be a little bit less likely to have the scenario where someone hasn't been in a serious relationship at all before, which
Yeah.
is Jacquelina, and then like I think people often have a better sense of what they want, and they're honestly more financially stable often,
Yeah.
they're out of school and they're a little more settled, so
Yeah. I think Brett is probably the most financially successful person on certainly this season or one of the, right? And it just struck me that like uh he's got like probably like a pretty important job at Nike, and it's probably like a kind of a somewhat of a reputational risk to go on a show like this, I think. I would say.
Oh,
Um
totally.
like
Totally.
I have not been what I would describe as a uh high powered executive at a company yet, other than my own. And
You're the highest powered executive
I'm the
at Decoding
highest
TV.
I'm the highest powered executive at Decoding TV. But if I if I was an employee in a company that had thousands of people, like for me to put myself out in a show like this and not knowing that it would go okay, that'd be pretty risky. Pretty risky. So all right. But good for them. Congratulations. Hope we bump into them at Trader Joe's sometime.
I think
Uh,
they're in Portland, so our loss.
damn. Okay.
As we were sitting on the couch with my parents, I was like, "Mom and Dad, do you see these people? Because I want to be friends with these people. So if these people show up in our life at some point, just remember, they're awesome." And for what it's worth, as my parents watched the show, Brett and Tiffany were by far their favorite couple, you
mhm.
know, unaided by me.
Let's talk about the final couple, Zach and Bliss.
I hope you dance.
They in the recap they brought up the "I hope you dance" thing again. Like the "I hope you dance" reference has been brought up, I think, at least 4 times during the course of the show.
I think it's 3 to 4. Yeah.
So I honestly didn't think that this would actually happen.
Really?
What my prediction was that they would say no but continue to date. That was my because
Oh,
it's so
okay.
quick. It's so quick. Like even if everything goes well in Love Is Blind, you only have like 3 to 4 weeks, and then they missed out on a weekend or however long they were in Mexico. So it's like they had significantly less amount of time. Bliss's dad really was an asshole the entire time. Like, I,
Including right up when he's
right,
walking her down
literally
the
right when
aisle.
he's walking her down the aisle, he's like, I was saying, oh, last time I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was saying, oh, maybe he got a really rough edit, but no, like he's while he's about to walk her down the aisle, he's still kind of being a dick about it, and so it's like, okay,
Just
he's just
remember, you're the one that has something to offer. Just remember, you always have your family no matter how things
yeah,
turn out.
yeah, he's just kind of being a jerk, and so, um, you know, first impression reinforced. That said, he does seem genuinely moved when she's up there at the
Yes.
altar. So, um, but the thing that made you and me die and our souls exit our body and fly into the nether realm was Zach's terrible speech at the altar. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard on Love Is Blind. Like, I thought Zach had already raised the bar for humiliation and self embarrassment when he sang the song to Irina. That was already like, you see, other cultures, they do these. I once saw this thing where like cultures like do these things where they like rip their bodies apart in like something called like the ecstasy of pain or whatever. Anyway, I've seen things where people like physically torture themselves, and I was like, wow, watching Zach sing to Irina was kind of like almost on that level, on a spiritual level.
Hmm.
But then I watched Zach give this speech to Bliss at the altar, and it is so awful because, first of all, it doesn't seem like it's prepared. So it seems like he's just riffing. And secondly, it seems like he's like bringing it back to like all the bad things that he said. He's like, I knew when I said no to you, it was the worst decision I'd ever made. And every time I thought about saying no, it filled me with and it's like, dude, do not be talking about this. This is so bad. And the way in which he's delivering it is bad. It's just, I hope they're happy, but that was really rough to watch. What did you think, Joy?
I was also surprised Brett, or I think maybe it was the officiant during Brett and Tiffany's marriage, brought up her falling asleep in the pods. It's like, wow, this is supposed to be like our triumphant moment where we look past some of our worst moments. And it
Mhm.
really did feel like Zach. I think there was a kernel of a good idea in there, which is like to acknowledge the mistake. But I feel like it then makes it about him and on some level makes it about Irina, who he doesn't mention. He doesn't say like saying no to you and then also saying yes
Right.
to Irina made me real. So there's something like, only dwelling on the negative or the lack of, it made me realize how much I missed you. Like, why don't you just say some of her positive qualities? Like, and which
Yes.
he eventually slowly gets to. It is a little discursive, you know, and a little meandery the way he gets there. And watching her face, because she bounds up and she looks like so happy, and then watching her face become more like, where is this going? You know, as she is having to stand up there. You know, I think Bliss has to probably put up with a lot to be with Zach. That said, Bliss has given these interviews in which she talked about the insane chemistry they have. And for me, that's not necessarily captured in the edit, but I believe it to be real. I
Yeah.
don't think she's
Yeah.
lying. And so I think there might just be something between them that we don't see. He really does come back to the owls and the I hope you dance again as like the signs that they should be together. And I suspect that these
And
are
you
not.
you and I are like screaming at the TV saying, "It's just a coincidence, Zach. It's not that big of a deal." Basically.
There are a lot of owls in the Pacific Northwest. It's a theme in Twin Peaks, which is shot in this area.
It would be
Like,
one thing. It would be one thing if it was, "Hey, my life's passion has always been to feed the poor," you know, and she's like, "And that's been my life. Oh my gosh, that's a huge," you know, that's like something that speaks to you, like the core of who you are, you know.
oh, like your values or your
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
characters
it's
or
just like she
priorities.
freaking likes owls in the song I hope you dance. It's just
Yeah.
again, if they are happy together, great. That's I love this journey for them. But to kind of present these things as like major milestones or achievements or whatever, like huge unlocks, is just ridiculous. And then to follow it up with that speech was just excruciating. Okay. That being said, they seem very happy together. So good for them. Um
I will also say her dress, I was pretty nervous about based on the bridal shop. But you know, I think the little sleeves are a little odd to me, but like I think it kind of comes together, and she looks lovely on her big day. So we might see them out and about because Kwame had to move from Portland. Tiffany moved to Portland, but this is the actual Seattle couple. So maybe we will run into them at the
yes.
Trader Joe's.
Yes, very possible. Very possible. And then they play the song "I Hope You Dance," and not only do they play the song "I Hope You Dance," but they play it for like the entire duration, I think, or the last like 3 to 5 minutes of the episode. Is that so? You really get the feeling that they spent, and I have a feeling not all the weddings listen to "I Hope You Dance" at their reception. So you get the feeling they spent probably, my guess is, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get "I Hope You Dance" to play on Love Is Blind. Their largest musical cue expenditure by far ever.
Everything else sounds like it was downloaded royalty free.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. They're
Okay, so
like
in
they're calling up. They're like, "Hey, have we ever done a song where you need to pay royalties before? I've never dealt with this situation before." They had to build a whole music department in order to play "I Hope You Dance" over the ending of these people's weddings.
alternately, someone called Leanne Womack and said, "Man, we got this tearjerker of a storyline. Can you let us have it for free?" Because I was trying to explain to my parents, who again don't know anything about reality television and really don't even they barely watch television. They recently have started watching Breaking Bad. So they're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, so this would be cheaper than Breaking Bad to make?" And I'm like, "Yes." It's
Mhm.
so budget that the edits don't even make sense and no one has the time to fix it or care. So the idea that they would blow a ton of money on music at the end is really, really shocking.
Yeah.
You get the sense a ton of stuff is donated for the publicity, venues are donated. So yeah, I and yet we got this huge emotional payoff.
I guess it feels pretty hollow to me.
It
Like
felt very hollow to me too.
it's not like, hey, I hope you dance was my mom's favorite song, and the reason it was important was because blank. It just, hey, it's a song I liked. I happen to like. I think right. That was there any backstory behind it? I don't think so. Right.
I think it's a little more than that. So if you listen to the lyrics, it's clearly about it's told from like a parent to their child,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically like to seize life, but also like not lose your sense of wonder and move toward love and away from fear and don't let bitterness take you. So I think it is a little bit more like that it
Fair
does
enough.
remind him of his mom.
And the stuff with Zach and
Um
his mom was genuinely moving, and
yeah, for
I don't want
sure.
to like denigrate that in any way. Um, but I just
But
feel like
but
the
the
show is
literal dance was quite awkward. People were crammed in around the bar. It was not a dance floor, and the people around don't really look like they're having a great time. They look like they're freezing, and some people are kind of, like, staring off into the distance. I feel like probably somebody held up their iPhone with the song on it. Like, it's not it
I
doesn't
am
feel
just
quite the triumphant moment that it should be.
I am just upset that the show has been trying to gaslight us into thinking that is not a common song. That is really why I'm so upset about it. But
I think she won, like, a Grammy or something, or a country music award. Like, I think it's, like, a pretty big deal. It's, like, the most famous song in her career. So
After
yeah.
coffee with Jess in the chat says, "I guess I was the only one bawling during that part. LOL. But I am enjoying your Zach rant regardless." So
I Hope You Dance won the 2001 Country Music Association Award for Single of the Year. It
uh,
also won the Grammy Award for Best Country Song and was nominated for Grammy Award for Song of the Year.
Released in March of 2000, the song reached #1 on both the Billboard Hot Country Singles and Tracks and Hot Adult Contemporary Tracks charts, and also reached #14 on the Billboard Hot 100. I'm just saying, this is not an obscure song, okay? This is not some freaking deep cut. That is all I am saying, okay? All right.
I do
Rant
think it worked, and since they paid the money for the song, the fact that they ran it over everybody's final, wedding shots. By the way, the weddings, like the little thing with Brett and Tiffany in the vintage green truck, like there were a lot of really nice little extra shots, I felt like. Yeah, they have really, really, really upped the wedding part of this in a
yeah,
way that I appreciate, because for people to put themselves through this humiliation, um, I think they deserve an actually decent looking wedding day at the end of it,
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, that's going to wrap us up here today on Decoding Reality. You can find more episodes of this podcast at decodingreality.tv, and check out our other TV coverage at podcast.decodingtv.com. Joy, we have 23 viewers live right now on the YouTube channel.
That's almost 2 dozen.
That is about 95% of our audience that listens to the podcast is currently live in the YouTube channel right now. So thank you so much for joining us today at youtube.com/decodingtv. We really appreciate that.
In 2 days. No, 1 day, tomorrow
Yeah, tomorrow, 36 hours.
at 5 o'clock
Yeah, 5
Eastern or
Pacific.
5
5
o'clock
Pacific.
Pacific?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will be watching live. Who knows how that's gonna go? I think Josh will come back. Like, I'm worried Jackie's gonna, like, throw the ring in Marshall's face and start a fight, but we'll see. She seems very upset. She seems very, very, very upset on Instagram.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to read that thing, yeah, because, I was trying to explain how upset she was. So I think it will be a very unpredictable reunion, and I have to say there is a frisson of excitement about this reunion because it is live. So a key part of their advertising has been, we don't know what will happen during the reunion. And I would say, by the way, also, when you watch the Chris Rock special, which they also broadcast live, they edited out some portions of it, or it was a slightly edited version that went up like VOD afterwards. So they will make it
Mm.
available afterwards. But if something happens or someone swears or goes on a rant against a minority group or whatever, they may edit it out. So I do think it is a thing that is worth watching live, because you don't know what the VOD is going to be. There will be a VOD, but you don't know if they're going to take anything out. So
Well, Jackie says she has receipts of Marshall, like, with a transphobic slur, and that will be in the reunion. I don't know if she knows that because that's, like, a pre-planned segment or something. I don't know. If Marshall has used a transphobic slur, that's not great for Marshall. It doesn't change anyone's view of Jackie, so I don't think that's, like, gonna help her the way that she thinks it might, but,
yeah, yeah,
whatever. It's gonna be real messy, and then
yeah.
Brett and Tiffany will, like, be like, "We're fine," and, like, run off the stage and hopefully, like, stay away from whatever melee breaks out. I do wonder if this will be in Seattle, versus, a soundstage in LA, but I'm not gonna be arrested for trying to break into anywhere on Sunday, That's my goal.
All right. Thanks for listening. And if you're a
Oh,
supporter,
and we will react, right?
yeah, our current plan is to watch it and then do another broadcast at youtube.com/decodingtv. And of course, you'll be able to listen to that at decodingreality.tv as well. And if you want to support this show, there actually have been a couple of subscribers, paid subscribers, that I think have signed up because of listening to Decoding Reality. So if you want to support what we do, decodingtv.com, become a paid member. You get everything in podcast form ad free. Thanks to everyone who's a supporter there. So,
Yes,
all right.
thank you.
Until tomorrow, goodbye.